Hello everyone, Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. I'm here with TCPA attorney David Carter, and we're answering your questions from the internet. So actually, we are in DC right now. Yesterday was the midterms, and a lot of people right now are talking about text messaging. And they're talking about text messaging because they've received text messages from a candidate, and maybe now, somebody that has won or lost, and they're wondering how they're getting these text messages because there is a thing called the TCPA, and the TCPA, at least as it applies to mass text messaging, you have to opt in and go through usually a double opt-in, and it's a pretty rigorous process. You know when you opt in for text messages on a short code. But a lot of people, a lot of consumers, friends and family are getting text messages from, it looks like people on behalf of a political campaign or political candidate. Are these messages in violation of the TCPA, or do, for some reason, are political messages exempt from TCPA? What's going on here?
Yeah, so I think let's start with the last question first, right? So political messages are not exempt from the TCPA. However, political messages are not marketing messages. So they're not trying to sell a product or service. And so the level of consent within the TCPA is slightly lower than what you might be referring to when you're talking about a brand sending out a coupon or doing that type of mass text messaging where it has to be written consent.
Okay. So
on political type messages, because again, they're not marketing a service, the consent can be expressed, but the FCC has said that might be something less than the full written consent process. Okay. So I think there's probably a couple different scenarios that we're seeing, and it's hard to sort of generalize political messages in all in one category or one way. But the first is, I know from personal experience and others that sometimes you may make a contribution to a political party, you may make a contribution to a political candidate. And in the course of that process of making the contribution, you may, in fact, be checking a box or doing other things that does permit them or give consent for the party or the candidate to then send you updates and messages about their campaign. Right?
So that's kind of the consumers giving up the phone number during some kind of normal course of business with that consumer.
Right, and
I guess normal, not business.
Right, like a voter, a voter or a constituent may at some point in time engage in one way or another with a campaign, and they may in that process express willingness to be contacted by the campaign and to get updates from the campaign. And because it's not required that they are these written consents, right? The level of way they give consent might just be providing their phone number to the campaign or doing other things like that during the course of, say, signing up to volunteer or do things.
So it's not as rigorous as going into Target or Best Buy and you have to text the keyword, then get a message back, consent by replying yes. It is a little less of a threshold.
There is going to be a lower threshold for political campaigns. You still have to have consent, and importantly, it's still the obligation of the campaign. If anyone challenges that consent for those types of messages, it would still be the campaign's obligation to show that they had received messages. Okay. So that's one category, right? Yep. One big category of maybe you did have some engagement, and that's why you're getting these messages.
But it doesn't seem like, at least right now, the people that, friends and family, it seems like it's coming out of kind of nowhere from people they've never heard from.
Right.
If you're saying that there had to be consent or they had to give up the phone number, I'm hearing from people they've never donated to a political candidate, but they're getting get out the vote, type text messages. So wouldn't those be in violation of the TCPA?
So then we're going to talk about the second category of messages, right? And the second category of messages is coming from different applications and service providers that are facilitating what is kind of generically referred to as peer-to-peer texting. Right?
P2P.
P2P, P2P, peer-to-peer to kind of think about it. So you're talking there about not mass automated text messages, but you're talking about something that is often reflective of more of a conversation between two people, right? And so when I've seen a lot of these messages, it will say like, hey, David, this is Sally, And I may not know who Sally is, but it's sort of expressing to me that there's supposed to be an individual that is behind this message. And so the important thing there to understand is that the Telephone Consumer Protection Act applies to text messages that are sent using what's called an auto dialer, or an ATDS is the definition, or the acronym that you will often hear. And so the first category of messages that we talked about, I'm assuming on that category of messages that the campaign might be using an ATDS, an auto dialer, to send out these messages to a lot of people at one time.
So they're clicking send in a computer system, and it goes out to 10,000, 10 million people, but they have some sort of consent. It might not be as strict as Best Buy.
Right.
But
they have at least been some affirmative consent, right?
Okay.
So those sort of bulk messages you're saying are using an auto dialer, and there should be should be consent behind it. And then we're talking about the second category being these more personal messages, P2P, peer-to-peer messages, where the way that those are structured is they're intended to not be using an auto dialer as defined by the statute, and therefore would be in a realm outside of the TCPA.
So they might be using like a program, but the fact that it's not mass texting or auto dialing, usually these apps or programs, it is a person, maybe not their friend, but a person
right,
that is clicking send on each message to each individual person. Maybe they're inserting their name, they're customizing the message. It's making it easier for people essentially to text message other people,
right,
but not on a mass text messaging scale.
Yes, so that's the at least the theory behind why there's been what we've seen as a rise, particularly in the midterm elections, in people receiving text messages of a political campaign nature, and then wondering, well, how did I get here?
And then being very personal messages because they're supposed to be P2P.
Right, and that's why typically you'll see in these messages, there's your name might be used, so they're trying to make it personal to you, and someone else's name is also being used to identify who's sending it to you, right? It's supposed to be this real person sending a real message to you. Not
the campaign, it's a person that works for the campaign.
Right, a volunteer of some sort that's
the campaign, if they're messaging, that really is a mass message because it's coming out and going to all the people in the members or whatever, supporters. But then the people that work in the campaign, that's more of a P2P. That's like me taking out my phone and texting you. That doesn't fall under the TCPA.
Exactly, right. So that's supposed to be that process, right?
Where so it's speeding it up, essentially, just making it easier.
You can text me, you can text a random person who you don't know, and you're not going to be governed in those circumstances by the TCPA because the TCPA is limited to messages sent using an auto dialer. And I think so we have these, again, two different categories of different types of messages that are being sent out on for political purposes, and you have to understand really the technology behind the message to then decide whether or not the TCPA is applicable or whether it's a really truly personalized message that's not subject to the TCPA. And I think that what we will see is a continued evolution of this question, which is a question that frankly is up in the air right now, that is being evaluated by the courts and by the Federal Communications Commission, of what exactly is the breadth of the definition of an auto dialer, and does it extend perhaps further into these types of P2P messages, or is it much more restrictive and it's only when you have a really long list and you press send one time and thousands of messages go out all at once. And so that debate is a debate that is continuing to happen in the courts and again at the FCC. And so it's something where what may be permissible today may not be considered permissible tomorrow.
On the P2P side, because it has been established, the nonprofit mass text messaging or big brands like Best Buy text messaging, those rules have been established, the consent, whether they're A to P or P to P, they're both A to P. It's this P2P thing that is kind of new, unknown yet, and the FCC needs to make rulings, court needs to make rulings, but at this point it is still unknown.
Yeah, I don't think that there's been. I think there might have been a couple courts that have looked at this, but I'm not aware of appellate courts and kind of it reaching the highest levels of consideration where we can say with definitive, make a definitive assertion about which of these programs are covered by the TCPA, which ones are outside of the TCPA. I think this is an area that we're going to continue to see evolution, and we're going to continue to see kind of even potentially an ebb and flow as different arguments get brought forward. And frankly, what will be, I believe, and I've heard from some reporters and others that are covering this issue now, it's going to be, I think, very important what the level of consumer pushback is or voter pushback is. And if a lot of people start complaining about these types of messages, then you maybe see more likely that the FCC will step in and say, well, the TCPA is going to extend to those types of messages as well. So I
really
see
depends.
this as kind of an area, again, where the technology is a bit further out than where the law and regulations are, and we're going to have to see where it all shakes out at the end of the day.
Okay. So really, it's all up in the air. But I think that answers the question of why people are getting these text messages. Everything from the Best Buy to the mass text messaging from nonprofits or political, all the way to kind of the P2P. It looks like it's coming from somebody you may know or may not know, but and why why it's happening, because it really has just started kind of happening, and why these brands and why these political candidates are thinking that it's okay.
Yeah, and I think we saw, we started to see some of this in the 2016 election cycle, right? But I do think that there has been, at least anecdotally from my own personal experiences, has been a really ramp up of use of this technology in the 2018 midterms. And the question will be whether that creates a big pushback from individuals that then causes the FCC or even Congress to kind of step in and try to rein in the use of the technology in some way. But for right now, I think they have a solid legal argument that they're outside of the TCPA, with some risks that some courts are not going to understand it and may not agree with it.
I think everybody knows text messaging, 99% open rates. It's a great way to
reach people, right?
Exactly. No matter if you're a politician all the way to a big box retailer.
Right.
So it just depends on how you do it. So, okay, well, that is very interesting. Hopefully that clears up a lot of questions out there, especially just coming off the midterm and people receiving these text messages. And as we head into 2020,
right,
I think you're going to see a lot of these messages, so you're going to understand why you're getting them and kind of how the laws apply to them or may not apply to them. Anyway, great discussion. I think very, very relevant right now. Luckily, I have a TCPA attorney to help me out with this, David Carter here. And my name is Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. And if you guys have any questions, maybe you get a text message and you're confused to why you got a text message or does the TCPA apply, definitely let us know and maybe we can help you on one of these videos.